We are going to start the lecture. Thank you for coming. Good morning. First thing, we are on a record. You need to know, okay? We have today Dr. Erik Hollnagel. He is a master in psychology from the University of Copenhagen, a PhD in psychology from the University of Aarhus, professor at the University of Southern Denmark, chief consultant at the Center for Quality Improvement, region of Southern Denmark, adjunct professor at Central Queensland University, Australia, visiting professorial fellow, Faculty of Medicine and Health Science at Macquarie University, Australia, visiting fellow of the Institute of Advanced Study of the Techniques, University of München, Germany, and professor emeritus at the Department of Computer and Information Science, University. I'm not sure if I pronounced Sweden, and a lot of lines more than I need to read, but it's late, then I will read. He's the author of the Functional Resonance Assessment Method FRAM. This is important for us, very important. We are working on that now, and others like clean and other methods. And the main intellectual leader of the resonance engineering all over the world. His theories and methods about that are currently the main stream of knowledge on safe design. It's a very good pleasure having you here, Dr. Hollnagel, in our School of Industrial Engineering of Malaga. Thank you very much for coming. When you want, you can start.
Okay, thank you. Carmen, do we need a microphone? Or do you need? I think we should ask. No. If you want it for it.
Okay.
Okay. Well, Carlos, thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me down here. It's very nice to be here. It's the first time actually. I've been to the airport several times, but I got a view of Malaga last night. It's very nice, very impressive. So I'm very honored to speak to you about this. You can see the title, Safe in an Unsafe World. I know that your Spanish is your first language. Unfortunately, my Spanish is very extremely limited, so I have to speak English. I will try to speak slowly. I'm not American, I'm not English, so it has to be slow. If I use terms or if there's anything you want to know while I speak, please stop me and ask, because you forget it otherwise, and in the end it never works. So let me start. So the title is, what I'm trying to talk to you about very briefly here is a different view of safety, a different understanding of safety, which has come from the work on resilience engineering and most recently in the formulation of the idea about safety 2, safety 1, and safety 2. So the starting point is this. When I say safety to you, so even if I said it in Spanish, but when I say the word safety, what do you think about? You think about something that has gone wrong. You think about an accident, you think about something that has happened that shouldn't happen. And if you look at the pictures here, safety, even from the Middle Ages, even before that, when you talk about safety, you talk about things going wrong. You take the picture to the right. It's a flooding somewhere, and some dam broke, and a lot of sludge came out. So we have always been thinking about safety, and when we think about something that goes wrong, the first question is why? why did it go wrong? What is the reason why it went wrong? And this is something that humans have been saying forever. And if you look at it historically, then in ancient times, maybe 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, even up until the Middle Ages, people would say, well, we can't explain it, so it's an act of God, or it's an act of nature. And this was the original explanation. When something happened we couldn't understand, we explain it by referring to something else. And usually it's nature and it's God, or you pray to God, or you sacrifice to the gods to make sure it doesn't happen again. As we started to become more, I wouldn't say civilized, but more technologically advanced, and started to build systems, started to build bridges and houses and ships, and invented the wheel, and invented machines, and invented the steam engine and trains and so on. And when we got into the industrial age in the 1760s and so on, and accidents still happen, but now we were more clever, so we could say, the accident is due to a technical failure. The machines broke down, something exploded, tanks were leaking, pipes were ruptured, wheels were derailed, axles broke, and so on. So we say it's a technical failure, and we can fix that. So we try to find the failure, we try to find the cause, and we try to fix the cause. And this worked very, very well through the 19th century and through a large part of the 20th century. But what happened was that all the time we started to build technological systems and machines and factories and so on that were more and more complicated. And so we started to get accidents that were less and less easy to explain as a result of a simple cause, a simple function. And this became the big issue happened in 1979. In 1979, we had a big accident in a nuclear power plant in the United States, at 3 Mile Island. You may have heard about that. And the problem was, when you try to explain why the 3 Mile Island happened, you could not say it was a technical failure, because there was nothing wrong with the nuclear power plant. It had been approved by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. It had been through a probabilistic risk safety assessment, had been cleared. It was not perfect, but it worked. So we still have to understand it. So the understanding was, well, maybe it was a human error, a human failure. And that solved a lot of problems, because now you could start to explain accidents as being caused by human failures. And it was very nice, because there were humans everywhere. There's always a human. You can always point the finger and say, you did something wrong. And this worked extremely well for a few years. Because in 1985, 86, you had a number of accidents, another nuclear accident, Chernobyl, you had the space shuttle disaster. And these were not accidents that you could explain by saying, oh, it's a human error, because they were too complicated, because the world became more and more complicated. So people found another explanation. They said, it's safety culture. It's an organizational accident. There's something wrong with the safety culture. So you explain it by pointing to the safety culture. And now we are in a situation where people begin to realize that it's not enough to talk about safety culture. So we say, it's a complex system, but nobody has the answer to what is the cause in the complex system. But we know it's something different. So what we have seen over the years is this development that we as human beings, psychologically, we like to have a single cause and a simple cause. If you want to explain something, you like to have a single explanation. So it's the act of God, it's a technical failure, it's a human error, it's a safety culture, it's a complex system, and even if you want to be more detailed, we invent causes. We say it's a human error, oh, it's a lack of situation awareness, it's a safety culture, it's complexity, and we can call these explanations for monolithic explanations, like the monolith there, like you know, if you remember the science fiction film 2001, there was a big monolith there. So we like something that's a single, simple cause, and that explains it. It's too much to think of two things at the same time, or three things, or 10 things. So we always try to find a simple cause. Take the problems that British Airways had during the weekend, where their IT systems broke down. And the director, the CEO of British Airways says the root cause was a power failure. So you find a single cause that explains it was a power failure. Now we understand everything. And it's probably more complicated than a power failure. There must be something else, I think. This is a very complicated situation. But we all like to have a simple explanation, because then we feel we understand, we can relax. I know what it is. And this is the issue with safety. We try to both to understand what happens in the sense that we find something that we can do something about. We can change it, we can improve it, we can remove it. But we also psychologically try to find something so we feel we're safe. We have an explanation. British Airways cannot say, we don't know why this happened. This is not acceptable to the public, to the company itself. We must have an explanation. It's very hard to say something happened and we don't know why. We always look for an explanation, and we prefer simple explanations. So the classical understanding of safety is that we look at situations where something goes wrong, and we're safe if nothing goes wrong. So the typical definition of safety in many fields is it's a freedom from harm, it's a freedom from risk, it's a freedom from accidents, it's zero accidents, and that's why we measure safety in this way. We measure safety by a curve that goes down, because we don't measure safety, but we measure accidents. We count the number of accidents, and we say, if this goes down to zero, or to an asymptote, as here, then we're safe. But we don't actually measure safety, we measure something else. And this is how we talk about safety, and this is how we think about safety. And you can say that the first and the most widely used interpretation of safety is this. As a formula, safety is the sum of accidents. Strangely enough, you measure safety by accidents and not by safety. The definition is safety is the prevention of harm, the prevention of unnecessary risk. And if you look at the ways that you try to understand safety, you have indicators of safety. And I've taken some indicators here from industry, HSE, health, safety, and environment, performance indicators. And the indicators are total recordable injury frequency. So how many injuries you have. It's lost time injury frequency. How much time have you lost? It's serious incident frequency. It's sickness absence. It's oil spills, it's other spills. So all the measures of safety are the measures of when there is no safety, not the measures of when there is safety. And this is because when we look at what happens around us, at everyday activities, at a construction site, in a hospital, in the traffic, in flying, and taking the train, whatever you think about. If you look at the outcomes, there are in principle, two types of outcomes. There are outcomes that are acceptable, successes, but just things that work. Like when you go home today after having been here, you come home safely. That's an acceptable outcome. That's what you want. And maybe you get home on time even. That's even more acceptable. Most outcomes are acceptable. And then there are unacceptable outcomes, when something happens that we did not want or did not plan or did not expect. But what we do when we look at safety is that we look at the unacceptable outcomes. And we say, why does this happen? And we look at the unacceptable outcomes and we say, well, if something went wrong, it was because something else went wrong. And we need to understand that, we need to explain that, we need to work on that. When something goes well, when you have the acceptable outcomes, what do? Do we say, why did this happen? Can I explain why it went well? No, we don't. We just say, well, that's what it should be. We don't worry about that. That's, of course, this is normal, this is natural, but we never look into it. And the consequence is that when we work with safety, we concentrate on accidents and incidents, and near misses, whatever. We concentrate on the unacceptable outcomes and try to study them and analyze them, and we try to learn from them, and we try to make sure they don't happen again. But nobody studies the acceptable outcomes. And nobody tries to learn from the acceptable outcomes. So we have a very one-sided view of safety. And this leads to the definition of safety, which is what we now call Safety 1. We call it Safety 1 because this was the first definition of safety, and because we think there is another way of defining safety. So safety is a condition with a number of adverse outcomes of accidents, of incidents, of near misses and so on, is as low as possible. And this is everybody would accept that definition without thinking about it. And this is the point. We never think about it. We just take it for granted. I have been, on several occasions, been the opponent of doctoral thesis about safety. And there was one some years ago in Norway, a guy who actually was an ex-pilot from the US Air Force wrote a very nice thesis about safety, but he never defined what safety was. 200 pages about safety, and he never says, this is my definition of safety. So this was my first question to him. Could you please define safety? And I still meet him, and he still reminds me of that, because it wasn't easy. But that's how we define safety. It has two problems, or it has several problems, but two major problems. One problem is, as I said, that when we measure safety, we actually measure the situations where there's no safety. We measure accidents, incidents, and so on. And many people have made that point because it's fairly obvious. But the other consequence is just as interesting, namely, if you want to learn about safety, what do you study? You study accidents. What is an accident? An accident is a situation where there was no safety. So we study situations, we study safety in situations where we say it's not there. And you are all students, you're studying, you are academics, you are researchers. How can you study something when it's not there? You can only study something when it's there. If you go to biology, if you go to astronomy, if you go to chemistry, if you go to physics, if you go to economics, they only study the things that are there. But in safety, you say, no, we study the things in situations where we say it's not there. So how can we learn something about safety when we study situations when we say there's no safety? It's very strange. And this, of course, is what Safety 2 and resilient engineering is all about. So if we look at safety in the classical sense, in that we now call Safety 1, the way we try to manage safety is by finding causes. We have something that we can call the credo of causality. I believe in causality. I believe that when something happens, there is a cause. And I think it's very reasonable to have that belief. I believe in that too. I certainly believe if I do something, it has a consequence. That's how we build our work. I believe when I press this button the next time, it will move to the next picture. So I very much believe in causality, but here we believe in the reverse causality. They say, if something happens, there must have been a cause. I think that's quite reasonable. We also say if something goes wrong, then the cause was something that went wrong. I don't think that's reasonable. There's no symmetry in value between outcome and cause. And we also think that we can reason backwards and find the cause and do something about it and eliminate it. And that's very unreasonable. But the way we manage safety is that if you take this glass, then we say, we are safe if this glass is empty. If there are no accidents, that's why I've colored it red. If there are no accidents, no incidents, if we can get rid of everything that goes wrong, if we have 0 accidents, then we're safe. So we study the accidents and we try to understand them, we try to dissect them, we try to analyze them, and we try to remove them. And that's how we manage safety. And as you know, it actually works quite well for many situations, but we get more and more situations and more systems where it doesn't work, because we create a world that's more and more complicated. And we create it partly because we don't understand it. That's another interesting aspect of that. So how do we manage safety? Well, we manage safety by snapshots, because if you take this picture here, the gray wavy curves lines represent the performance of a system, the behavior of a system. And it's characteristic of the systems that we deal with, being a construction site or a service organization or whatever, that the performance of the system and all the elements, the parts, the components, the subsystems is variable. There are systems that are not variable, and I have one here. This system has very little variability, and it's designed to have very little variability, and it works very well. We can do that because we know exactly how it works, because we have built it. But most of the systems we have around us are not technical, they're socio-technical. They're people, they're organizations. In fact, everything is actually a socio-technical system. And in socio-technical systems, there's always variability. But usually the variability is so small that it doesn't matter. That's why I have this line here that says the limit of unacceptable performance. And the limit is depending on the situation. It's not a fixed limit. It depends on the conditions. But usually performance is acceptable. Every now and then something happens that goes through the limit, that passes through the threshold. We call them accidents and incidents. But the point is that when we try and I don't know if maybe I disappear from the camera now, but when we try to manage this, because this is what we should manage, we look at this. We look at the snapshots of situations where the system doesn't work. So you can ask yourself, how can you manage the way the system works if you only look at the snapshots of situations where it doesn't work? Is that really sensible? This is a rhetorical question, and of course the answer is no, it's not sensible, in case you wonder. So what should we do in safety? Well, and this is the argument of resilience engineering, this is the argument of safety 2, this is the argument of the alternative way of looking at safety. We should know we should try to find out what happens here. Because when we're here, we're safe. When we're here, we're unsafe. And we want to be here. When I fly home today, I want to be in this region. Both in terms of physical safety, and I'm pretty sure I will get home safe, but also in terms of delays, for instance. This is maybe not a safety issue, but I would like things to work. I would like things to be predictable. We want our world to be predictable. We try to manage our world so that it is predictable. But in order to do that, we need to understand how it works. We cannot make it predictable by focusing on situations where it doesn't work. We have to understand how it works. So if you look at it in this way, you can say, well, let's try and represent a situation where you have a probability of failure of 10 to the minus 4. And we can illustrate it in this way. This circle represents 10,000 events. Or it could be 1,000, it could be 100,000, or whatever. Because for the example, we say 10,000 events. And we have a probability of failure of 10 to the minus 4, 1 out of 10,000. And that is maybe you can see it. Anyway, you can see there's a big red arrow which points to a very small line, which represents 1 out of 10,000. So what do we do when we work with safety? We look at that event, at one event out of the 10,000. And we have to look at it because we have laws and regulations that require us to report them and to analyze them. Companies are interested in them. You have specialists in companies, you have safety departments that look at the accidents, you have safety specialists, safety directors, you have a journal called Safety Science, you have a journal called Reliability Engineering and System Safety, you have tons of books about them, you have meetings about them, we have methods about that to analyze that, we have very nice models that explain all that, we have tons and tons of data, huge databases about the situation where something goes wrong. We have statistics about it. Every year you have a number that says how many people were killed in the traffic last year, how many accidents did we have the last year, and so on. So we know an awful lot about that. When you think about accidents, one thing that's characteristic is that they are easy to see. They are obvious because they're different. you always know when something has gone wrong. It's easy to notice an accident. You can see it, you can hear it, you can smell it. It actually turns out that they are quite complicated to explain and understand. It's quite difficult to change the system. It's quite difficult to manage it. That's why our systems are still very much unsafe, in the sense that we still have events that are unwanted events. We still have accidents. Not many, but we can never get down to zero. What resilience engineering says, what Safety 2 says is, yes, this is fine. We should study accidents. Don't misunderstand. We should try and understand accidents. We should focus on them. We should analyze them. But we should also look at the green. Because these are the 9,999 times where things go well. Do we understand that? First of all, are there any requirements or regulations that say we must study what works well? No, there isn't. Are there any companies that have a real safety department that look at what works instead of looking at what doesn't work? Not really. It's very unusual. Do we have any methods to analyze it? Yes, we have, but very, very few. Do we have any models to explain it? Yes, we have, but very, very few. Are there any experts in this field? Not very many. Do we have any data? Strangely enough, we don't almost we have a little data, but not very much. Not because the data are hard to get, but because we don't collect them. We don't look at it, we don't ask. One reason for that could be that the green events, the normal events, the successful events are, as people say, very difficult to see. Sometimes when I talk to people about this, and when we have discussions, and I say, you should look at the situations where you don't have accidents. And then people very often say to me, but nothing happens. And I tell them, no, you're wrong. Many things happen, but you don't pay attention to it. And you don't pay attention to it because it's the same thing that happens all the time. And when the same thing happens all the time, we stop paying attention to it. And there's a very good reason for that. In psychology, it's called habituation. You get used to it. And it makes a lot of sense from an evolutionary point of view. But we should stop and think and say, well, maybe we should try and look for these things. And the strange thing is, if you do, they're actually quite easy to see. They're actually a lot easier to explain than the accidents. They're a lot easier to change, and they're a lot easier to manage. Now, there was and is a very, very clever professor in the US whose name is Carl Weick, one of the originators of something that's called high reliability organizations, looking at why organizations work so well. And he proposed in the 90s a definition of safety that's slightly different. Actually, it was a definition of reliability, but I changed it to safety here. He said, safety is a dynamic non-event. Safety is when something doesn't happen. And this is good. This is what we're talking about. Safety is the non-event. It's the absence of accidents. It's the freedom of accidents, but we should look at the non-event. We shouldn't look at the event. We should look at the non-event. He also said safety is a dynamic non-event, which means that it's not something that just happens by itself. You have to invest effort to make sure that it doesn't happen. It's dynamic, it changes. You have to work very hard at it to make sure that you have the non-events. So it's a very sensible definition in a philosophical sense. it has a problem. Namely, if you want to count safety, you want to measure safety, and you say safety is the sum of the non-events. And the question is, how do you count how many times something does not happen? And of course, you can't. You can only count how many times something happens, not how many times it doesn't happen. If you drive your car here and drive home, when you drive home tonight, how many times did you not have a collision? 1, 10, 100, 1,000, who knows? So it's a very nice idea, and I like it very much, but it has a practical problem. You cannot define a measurement of it, and we need to measure. We need to measure in order to manage. So, but the question it asks is this: why doesn't anything happen? If you take a traffic situation, this is from Arc de Triomphe in Paris. If you take this situation, this is a shopping mall in Singapore, I believe, but it doesn't matter. If you take this situation, it could be a train station, it could be an airport, it could be a shopping mall. We all go in these places, we all walk in these places. And the question you should ask yourself the next time you go there is, why do people not collide with each other? You shouldn't ask why do they collide with each other, because it happens very rarely. You all walk in these places, and you all walk, and you never, or almost never, collide with other people. You almost never bump into other people. The interesting question is why? Why don't you collide? And if you stop to think about it, and I'm pretty sure you haven't, very few people have been thinking about that. It's very easy to observe, by the way. But if you stop to think about it, the reason why is that the way you walk, you always see through, you don't look at it, but you just see what's happening around you, and you adjust the way of walking. You don't walk in a straight line. You don't drive in a straight line. At least you'd have to drive in the lane, but when you walk, that's why I like walking as an example. We walk, we change our speed, we change our direction, and everybody does that relative to each other. And that's why it works. Everybody adjusts what they do to what the others do. It's a mutual adjustment. That's the reason why we don't have collisions, why people don't bump into each other. And the same thing happens in work, in activities, in whatever you're doing. There are these adjustments all the time, and we need to understand these adjustments because they are the reason why things go well. So we shouldn't look at the situations where you have collisions. You should look at the situations where you have no collisions and try to understand why don't you have collisions. So if you do that and ask people, well, why is work safe? And if you ask people, they will answer from their own perspective, naturally, because this is what they understand best. So they will all say, well, work is safe because of how we do our work, and because we are able to adjust to the situations. Yes, I know we have procedures, but we also know that we cannot always follow the procedures. So when you work on this level, it's safe because I know how to do things right. I know I try to follow the guidelines, but I also know when I should make adjustments, when I should make modifications. When you manage, it's the same. It's the same. It's safe because I can look at the situation. I can understand what is happening. I can make adjustments and so on. And you should go to the top level, of course. Well, interestingly enough, there are no procedures there. There are no guidelines. There are only modifications. There are only improvisations. There are only adjustments. And that's why it's safe, they will say. When we study this, we come across two terms that are beginning to be used quite a lot. And the two terms are here. One is work as imagined, and the other is work as done. Now, work as imagined is, how do I think that work should be carried out? How do I think that something should be used? And I can take a simple example. When they designed this, they said, well, this is going to be used to control the slide presentation. So there should be some buttons on it that people can understand and use so that they can do their work. And it should have a certain size. It should be equally useful for people who are left-handed and right-handed and so on. So whoever designed this have an idea about what it is going to be used for, and he or she designs this so it fits the purpose. Goes for a simple system like that. It goes for a control room in a nuclear power plant. It goes for a car. It goes for a crane. It goes for a machine. It goes for everything. We have ideas about how it should work. We call it work as imagined, and we use these ideas to design the work. When we, in the middle, when we plan work, when we manage work as managers, as worksite managers and leaders and so on, we also have ideas about how the work should be done. Who do we need to be there? What kind of competence do we need to have? When should people be there? How should they focus and so on? And when we look at situations where something went wrong, then of course we say, well, if they only had followed the procedures, if they only had done it in this way and not in that way, then it would have been right. But in each case, there's also how work is being actually done. And resilience engineering and safety too, and also modern human factors and economics says, well, we should look at how work is actually done, because when people do their work, they try to do it right. They try to be successful. They try to be effective. They try to be productive. They try to do as well as they can. They don't try to make accidents. They don't try to make mistakes. They try to make sure that it works. So we need to understand how they do that, because in most cases it works extremely well. And this is where the idea about performance adjustments come in. Performance adjustments are always necessary. Just take when we started this lecture, you said, there are some Erasmus students on the way. We wait 5 minutes. That's a performance adjustment. And it means that we try to maximize it so that all those who wanted to be here can actually be here and listen to it. It's okay. We can adjust for that later on if I had a very strict time limit, which I hope I don't have. If I had to finish it at 11 o'clock sharp, I could finish at 11 o'clock sharp. I could adjust the way I talk. I could use fewer examples. I could skip some of the slides. I could speak faster, but I'll try not to do that. So, but all the time we adjust, and it's natural, and we do it very effectively. And when we study work, we understand that this is why we have successful outcomes. We have successful outcomes because we're able to adjust what we do to the situation. And you know that from your own work. In fact, you're proud of the adjustments that you make because you're smart. But when we look at that, we also understand that we have unacceptable outcomes for the same reason, because of the adjustments. Not because of errors, not because of failures, not because something was wrong, but because we always have to adjust, and which means that what we do is never precisely, exactly what is the optimal thing in the situation. We never have time and resources and information to do that. We have adjustments, and they are usually, in the majority of cases, absolutely good enough. And that's why we do that, even when it goes wrong, because we don't know it's going to go wrong. We think it's going to go right. So we do what we think is necessary to make things go right. So this gives a different view of safety. We still have the acceptable outcomes, and we have the unacceptable outcomes. But now we understand that they come from the same behavior. They come from the performance variability. They come from the adjustments that people make to work. And this has an interesting consequence, because when we have something going wrong, and this is still what attracts attention, and this is still what we have to deal with, this is still what the authorities require us to deal with. But if we understand how things happen, then we also understand that in order to explain that, we shouldn't study that and find the cause. We should study the same situation where it worked and understand how it happened there. Whenever something goes wrong, whenever there is an accident, it's never the first time it happened. It's extremely rare. Of course, there can be cases, but normally when something goes wrong, it has happened before. It's work that has been done before, and it has worked before. And you need to understand how it went well before. You need to study that. You need to understand why people did it in a certain way. Once you understand that, then you can go back to the accident and understand the accident based on the everyday performance. Because this is what people did, because they didn't know there was going to be an accident. They did what they normally do, and what they normally do normally works. So this is the view of safety, that you have to change your focus. And it changes the definition of safety. And this is now what we call safety 2. It says safety 2 is a situation or condition where the number of successful outcomes, the number of things that go well, is as high as possible. It's the ability to succeed under varying conditions. So this means two things. We solve two problems. One problem is, how do we measure safety? Well, we measure the things that go well. The second thing, how do we learn about safety? Well, we study the situations where things go well, which is situations when there is safety, not when there is a lack of safety. And the advantage is there are so many situations you can study. You don't, one of my good friends or colleagues who is safety manager for a very big organization says, you don't have to wait for an accident to become better. In fact, you shouldn't wait for an accident. You should study when there's no accidents and try and learn from that. That's the only way to improve performance. So when we think about safety, we should not think about things going wrong, but we should think about the good situations. We should think about the everyday work when things go as it should. We should think, if you can see the curves, we should think about something that gets better, that improves. It's not getting down to zero, but it's getting up. It's getting as much as possible. That is what safety is. Safety is not protective. Safety is productive. Safety is an investment in productivity. It's not a cost, it's an investment. It's an effort that you get back. And of course, this leads naturally to the third interpretation of safety, which is taking Karl Weick's clever definition again, but instead of saying safety is a dynamic non-event, we say safety is a dynamic event. Safety is something that happens, but it doesn't happen by itself. You have to work at it, you have to invest in it, you have to manage it, you have to understand it. Safety is a dynamic event, and the measure of safety is a measure of the dynamic events that go well. So it's proportional, and the higher the level of safety you have, the higher the measure is. Instead of saying in the safety 1, the higher the level of safety, the lower the measure, which is sort of confusing because it's counterintuitive. There's a proportionality in it. And this means that the focus of safety studies and the focus of resilience is, and now I've colored them green, is what goes well. We should look at what goes well. We should try and understand why it goes well. We should try and understand the variability. We should try and understand the adjustments and modifications, the way that this is dynamically changing all the time, but it keeps itself stable. Most of the time it keeps itself very stable, and in many cases the number of accidents is very, very small. In aviation, the probability for me as a passenger to die during a flight is 1 in 7 million. So I have to fly a lot of times before I think I'll die from other reasons before I die from an aircraft accident. And unfortunately, in other cases, the number is quite different. I work a lot with hospitals now, and the probability, not of dying, because we're talking about different things, the probability of suffering something that is different from the reason why you came into the hospital, the probability of getting an infection or getting a bed ulcer or falling or something that's unrelated to your disease is 1 in 10 if you go to a hospital, 10%. Not because hospitals are dangerous places, but because they're very complicated places, which are very difficult to understand. So resilience engineering and safety 2 looks at this and say, we need to be able to do well. We need to understand how things go well. We need to understand the dynamic events. And the question is, how can we do that? What should we be looking at? Because we need to study that. We need to be systematic about it. Resilience itself, there have been several definitions of resilience because it has developed over time. The first meeting on resilience was in 2004. There's a meeting now again next month, but it has developed over time. The definition now is this: resilient performance means that an organization or a system can function as required, as it has to function, under expected and unexpected conditions alike. And the unexpected conditions are changes and disturbances, but there are also opportunities. It is important to be able to use opportunities. And the question that resilience engineering asks and deals with is, what do you need to be able to do that? And to be able to do that, we have found that there are 4 things an organization or system must be able to do, 4 potentials we call them. You must be able to respond. When something happens, you must be able to respond to what happens. This is fairly obvious, of course. You must be able to monitor. You must be able to keep an eye on the situation. You must be able to notice what's going on. Because if you don't monitor, then you will always be surprised when something happens. And if you're always surprised when something happens, it's not very good. We all like surprises, but I don't want everything that happens in my day to be a surprise. I want very few things to be a surprise. So I need to monitor what's going on. We need to learn. You must be able to learn, because if you're not able to learn, then you will always respond in the same way. You will never be able to improve the way you respond. You will never be able to improve the way you monitor. So of course you must be able to learn. And the last thing is you must be able to anticipate. You must be able to look ahead. Monitoring is looking at what happens now, but you must be able to think what is going to happen in the future, depending on your business, is what is going to happen down the line in 10 years, in 20 years, in 50 years. When you build a hospital today, or when you build a university like this 5 years ago, you must be thinking, well, what is Spain going to look like 50 years from now? How many students will there be? What kind of activities will there be? What kind of facilities do you need in a house like this? You have to think ahead all the time. When you build an aircraft, when you build a car, when you build a bridge, whatever you do, you must anticipate and say, what will the conditions be further ahead? We cannot say for sure, of course, but we can think about it. So that's the basic of resilience engineering and resilience. You must have these four potentials. You must spend effort to improve your ability to respond, improve the potential to respond. You must improve the potential to monitor. You must improve the potential to learn. You must improve the potential to anticipate. And this is a start for being more concrete, because instead of saying you should be more resilient, we can say, well, we should improve our ability to monitor, our potential to monitor. What does that mean? And then you can ask specific questions to your organization. How do you monitor? What do you look at? How often do you look at it? Who looks at it? How long time does it take to interpret it? How is the information communicated in the system? You can ask very specific questions and get very specific answers, which enable you to actually improve it. So, well, actually, I have some examples here of standard questions you can ask. I'll just take one question from each. For responding, for which events are we prepared to respond? Because there are always some events that we are not prepared to respond to. Take British Airways, for instance. They were not prepared to respond to a total failure of the IT system. That's not very good. And you can say again, if you take that, they had not anticipated that this could happen. And they probably weren't able to monitor the system very well. And my guess is they're probably not going to learn very much from it. They're going to say, oh, we need double power supplies here and there and there. And then they think they have solved the problem. But they haven't. So you can ask specific questions for each of these. You can start to develop a vocabulary for it, and there are techniques for that. And this method is being used in a number of companies now already, and it's being used more and more. So to come back to this, if you want to manage safety in the safety 2 perspective, you remember the figure I had before managing safety 1, and I said, if you take the glass there, the analogy is that if the glass is empty, then you're safe. Safety 2 says, no, if the glass is full, then you're safe. If everything goes well, then you're safe. So what you should try and do is to understand how things happen and try to increase the number of things that go well. You should try and fill the glass so it's absolutely full. Then you're perfectly safe. There will still be things in there that go wrong. That's why I have the little red bubbles in there. There's still accidents. There's still unexpected events. We should, of course, study them and try and understand them and try to make sure they don't happen. But we cannot study them in isolation. We can only study them as part of the everyday activities, as part of the green, so to speak. So the advice is, what should we look at? What should we focus on? We should focus on what happens all the time, rather than only on what happens rarely or exceptionally. We should look for work as done. We should look at what actually is done and not look at how we think things are being done. We should look at what the actual work situation. And when you try to learn, then traditionally we say we learn from accidents, and the more serious an accident is, the more we think we can learn. No, wrong. We should say we should learn. The criterion for learning is not the seriousness of something, but the frequency of something. How often does it happen? The things that happen all the time are the most important things to learn from, precisely because they happen all the time. And they're usually small things. They're easier to manage and easier to understand and easier to control. So to summarize it, to end, if you say, compare the safety 1 and the safety 2 perspective in terms of the goals, the position, the means, and the focus. In terms of the goals, the goal of safety 1 is 0 accidents, as few things as possible go wrong. The goal of safety 2 is the opposite, that as much as possible goes right. The position means, how do we know how well we're doing? In safety 1, we know how well we do by counting the number of things that go wrong, and then we think we know how well we're doing. In safety 2, we know how well we're doing by actually looking at what happens, by understanding what is going on, by looking at the things that go well and understand why they go well. The means of improvement is, in safety 1, classical thinking about causality, finding the causes, eliminating the causes, or weakening the causes, of building barriers and trying to prevent. In safety 2, the means are to try and understand what goes on. This means we need to switch from linear thinking to nonlinear thinking. We need to switch to what has been called non-trivial systems. We need to understand the complexity of the systems and not try to reduce the complexity. And finally, the focus, and again, the focus in safety 1 is work as imagined and the difference between work as imagined and work as done. And trying to eliminate that difference by saying you should work as we imagine. In safety 2, the focus is what actually happened. It's more work as done, and we say we should try to reconcile or try to reach an agreement between work as imagined and work as done. Not saying work as done is wrong and work as imagined is right. But in safety 2, we say work as imagined is not right and work as done is not right, but it is there. We need to adjust the two. We need to reconcile the two. We need to reach an agreement between them. So I think that was my last slide, and it was. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. One question? Any question? No? I have a question.
You have a question.
What about the culprit? Because we are looking for always a single cause, a simple cause. The legislation, the regulation, and the authorities are always looking for that. When we apply these methods and these theories, we can get this problem, no? From your perspective, your experience, what do you think? What problem you have with the regulators?
Well, I think I'll stand up, so maybe for the camera. I think there's, in my experience, it's not very large, but my experience is that there is maybe a problem with the regulations as a law and as rules, because they are based on a very simple thinking of causality and finding reasons, and there are a lot of concerns that go into that. When you talk to regulators, to the people who are there, and if you sit down and talk to them, and we have had regulators on the causes that we run, they understand the situation. But they also understand that they are in a situation where they are pressed for time and pressed for information, and they make the very same adjustments. In trying to find the explanations, they make adjustments. And they try to simplify the situation and say it's probably like this and so on. So And they understand that they're doing exactly what everybody else is doing. We're all humans and we all basically work in the same way. So I would say there's a difference between the regulations, the text, the laws, and the regulators, the people who carry out the laws. And it's probably more difficult to change the regulations than to change the regulators.
I think we have had several big accidents here, like the Gross train, and they found a culprit. We have the driver. We can pay for the victims if the investigator, the researchers of these accidents appear with a study focused on residents. Maybe the government has a problem, and they will try to say no, this is not. It's the way it's happening.
Of course, I recognize what you're saying. I could say that the government has a problem if it doesn't understand this. In the long term, they will have a problem. I think they benefit from understanding this and from learning from this, and they're beginning, or the companies are beginning to understand that. Let me give you an example. In 2011 or 12, I forget, there was a train accident in Belgium, in Buizingen, where two trains. They didn't collide head-on, but they were passing each other, and one was crossing the track, and they did collide, and it was a very serious accident. Many people were died there. When they looked at the accident, they realized that one of the trains a bit further away had a stop signal, but it hadn't stopped. And this is something that happens every now and then in trains. You've had that in Spain too. You miss a signal. And of course the explanation is obvious, right? The train driver missed the signal. It's a human error. It's very simple. What they did in Belgium was they said, well, when they did the investigation, they said, well, how many times a year does a train go through a stop signal? And this was very easy to answer because this is measured by the automatic train systems. 130 times a year. So you suddenly say, okay, you have 130 times a year where you have a dangerous situation, you have one accident, so okay, 1 out of 130. And then somebody said in the accident investigation, said, how many times a year does a train stop at the stop signal? Because this is the interesting question. Not how many times doesn't it stop, but how many times does it stop at the stop signal? And then this was the company who asked that. And of course, nobody knew the answer because nobody counts that. But the unions, the syndicates, they said, this is very interesting. We will try and calculate. And they made an estimate. And they estimated that a train stops at a stop signal 13 million times a year in Belgium. So suddenly you have one accident out of 13 million possibilities. And instead of saying it's an unsafe system, you say this is actually a very safe system. Well, the next question is, and I don't suppose you are train drivers, but you are all car drivers. So we can ask the same question. When you come to a red light, do you always stop in the same way? Do you always brake the car in the same way? And the answer, of course, is no. We brake the car depending on the conditions, depending on which car it is, depending on how much load there is in it, depending on the traffic and so on. And it's the same with trains. They don't stop in the same way. They don't stop in 13 million different ways, but they stop in many different ways. And once you understand that, then you can go back and look at the accident and say, well, what was the situation here? What was the weather? What was the train? What was the schedule? And what would normally happen? So this is not yet something that comes to the level of the authorities or the regulators, but it comes to the level of the company, and they begin to understand that you need to change your ways of looking at things. Because otherwise you end up saying, well, train driver passed the red signal, I think he died in the accident, even problem solved. Don't pass a red signal, and you will be perfectly safe.
I have another question about the procedures, because resident engineering is a different way to produce procedures. And in your practical experiences with the companies, when you have finally have a procedure and you have compared, if you compare, I don't know, you saw differences, significant differences between old procedures and the new procedures. Really,
I think there aren't many procedures that are yet that have been produced in this way, but we have a number of cases where it has been possible to analyze procedures and guidelines using, I think you mentioned the FRAM in your introduction, using the method FRAM. And by doing that, and in some cases we have been allowed to do that before the guideline was put into use. So we got the guideline that was written, we analyzed the guideline, and it was pointed out that this guideline was not going to work. So people changed the guideline before they put it into use. So so at the moment we are at that state that we can look at it and we can analyze it and we can explain to people why it's not going to work, and they accept that, and then they change it. I don't think you will ever have a formal basis for writing a guideline like that, but you can evaluate the guideline as you do it. So, and that happens.
Okay. Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Hollnagel. We have enjoyed a lot your lecture today. I have a question, because I think that nowadays many professionals and companies think that they can reduce the rate of sinistrality in the company thanks to the traditional procedures. Then, how can we promote this new perspective to work in another way? How can we promote this safety too? Yes.
It's a question I get asked quite a lot. How can we change that? How can we promote that? There's no simple way of doing it. Our experience is we work with the people who actually do the work, and they understand it immediately. And then they change their work, and then their superiors notice that something has changed, and they also understand, they see the benefits of it. So I don't think there is a single argument or that we can simply argue to regulators that or to managers that they need to change. But we see, and now we have quite a number of years of experience in different countries and in different activities, that when people understand that, then they say, okay, this makes a lot of sense. Let's try to promote that. Let's try to use that when we plan our work, when we build our systems, when we design new work. So, but there's no, maybe I'm very, very stereotyped and here, but managers and the times I've met them on that level, they have many things to do, so they have a limited time to look at this and try and understand this. But if you can say, look at what we say, then they become very interested. And we have a few examples where we actually have good measurements of the savings that you get from doing this. And the savings are substantial. And then managers become very interested and say, oh, we have to do this as well. So maybe that is the way forward, to have more practical examples that allow them to see the practical benefits of it. And that's why I use the term, I think safety 2 is what we call productive safety, where safety 1 is protective safety. And productive safety means that you try to make things go well, and that means you produce more, and you increase the quality, you increase everything. So safety is when things go well, not when you avoid accidents. And I think most people understand that difference, and they're interested in how can we make things go well. But we don't have a silver bullet to make the change.
We have some case studies that verify that this safety 2 is better than safety 1 in a case of a study in a company, in a country, I don't know.
Yes, we have some companies that are trying to use this because they can see the advantage of this. It actually makes them more productive. It makes them more flexible, which is good. The customers are happier and they are able, and they're also safer. But for them, safety in the sense of avoiding accident is not the main motivation. The main motivation is to be flexible, to use the resources better, to have greater customer satisfaction, and this helps them in that way.
Thank you very much.
We have 2 questions through this chat, and the first one says, I am a professional who collaborates with several construction companies. In Spain, anyone can be a builder. Most of them don't have any academic training. Do you think this slows down the performance of safety coordinators? And we have the safety coordinators as the engineer working in the construction. I think most countries have the same. Do you think that builders and real estate developers, promotion, should have minimal preparation?
Well, to be honest, I don't think that's a guarantee for anything. I think it's more important that people have a good understanding of what they're doing, and they have a good technical knowledge, but not necessarily academic knowledge. I don't think having an academic degree in itself qualifies very much. But it's having common sense and being able to use that knowledge. That's important. So professional knowledge is more important than academic knowledge.
And second one is how are you working with monitoring? I think he refers to leading indicators or
yes.
Monitoring the safety in a positive way, leading. No?
Yeah. Well, we are working. We have actually one of my students have been working on that for some time now to develop a systematic way of identifying good indicators. And I think she's been doing very well. So we are working on that, trying to understand how we should find effective indicators, meaningful indicators. And others are working on that too. We are certainly not the only ones. And I know everybody, many people are interested in that problem, but to find effective indicators that also are meaningful indicators, because it's not enough to count how many people die every year. That's not an indication of anything. But that's why I like Carl Weick's definition, a dynamic non-event, or a dynamic event. So we need to, indicators should be indicators of the events that we want, and not of the events that we don't want. And all it takes is a little imagination, because everybody who manages work actually know what to look for, but they never write it down. But they all have the experience and know what are the good indicators. And so what we need is to talk to these people and get it out.
I have a question. I think that you have said that the systems go well because of the adjustment.
Sure.
And I don't know if, for me, it sounds like adjustment sounds like an improvisation, something that you make in a moment without thinking about it. And I don't know if this is right, if there is this relation, and if this is right, it could be a difficulty for the system because something that an improvisation is difficult to learn, difficult to teach, and difficult to establish the accountability, the responsibility of the people. Is this right or I'm not right?
Yeah, well, no, I don't mean it in that sense. And if I can take the example again I used before, because I think it's a good example. When you walk in a crowd of people, you make adjustments all the time. You don't improvise. You make adjustments that you are used to make, and everybody makes adjustments. And because here in Spain, you walk in a certain way, and there's a certain distance to other people that is acceptable and unacceptable. In China, the distance is much smaller, and it's more, you have to walk in a different way. So we make these adjustments, and I would not call them improvisations, because it's not like a major change. It's a small change that you have learned through years and years, or through your time of doing this, of walking, through your time of working in a situation, in a condition, that this kind of adjustment works, and it becomes a habit. It becomes a part of the good practice. It's part of your expertise to make this. You are an expert in walking in a crowd of people, and we're all experts in walking in a crowd of people. So it's not improvisations, because if people really start to improvise, then they become unpredictable, and then it breaks down. So predictability is a very important issue of it, and we all make adjustments that are predictable because we have learned what works in other situations. And it's in that sense that we mean adjustments.
Okay.
No, question, online question. The people is asking.
New York in the future, prevention, monitoring, technician, and safety too. This is the question.
Sorry, say again?
He asks there will be a new job in the future, a specialist on safety too. We need to change.
I'm sure there will. I can't hire you, but I mean, there is a lot of interest in this from industries all over the world. So we may not call it a safety 2 specialist, or maybe they will in 10 years' time. I don't know, but of course there will be an interest in this. If you have the skill to do something and to improve the situation, there will always be a job for you.
Okay. Another question, the last question.
So I was thinking while the lecture was going on, like, do you think that technology like AI or artificial intelligence can make a huge impact in this safety field? If the companies are monitoring this, like nowadays, maybe some companies are monitoring this data of when systems do their work fine, if the things are going well. If started to collect this kind of data using that big data algorithms, like big data related, or maybe artificial intelligence to create some models can make an impact in this safety?
I think that for any data, they're only useful if you can make sense of them, if you understand what's going on. I have some skepticism about data mining because that actually is actually saying, well, I don't know how to understand this, but now we use statistical techniques and we see patterns. And there can be some advantage in that. This can be a step forward, but eventually you have to make sense of it. You have to be able to understand what's going on. And once you do that, you also know which data you need. So you don't need to collect a lot of data. It's knowing what's important. Then you look at that. That's the art of monitoring is not collecting all the data that you, as like let's say Facebook does, collects terabytes or whatever. I don't know what the name are, these huge trillions, billions, whatever, fantasillions of data and go through it and trawl through it and data mine it. I think the smart people know what to look for. And because they have an understanding of what's going on. And of course you have to adjust that understanding all the time. But then you are far more effective. So I mean, you should use all the techniques that you possibly can as long as you know how to use them. But don't use a technique that you don't know how to use and don't know how it works. Because then you're going to lose control.
And thank you very much. It's out of the rooms asking us to say to you, congratulations for your conference, for your lectures. Very nice. And thank you very much.